Okay, so I'll share my screen now.
I will share first, and when
Okay.
I stop, and please share. Okay, thank you.
Okay.
All right. Good afternoon, and welcome to our NDE, NILA, and CLTA K-12 guest speaker series. I really appreciate your support and your participation. And today we have Martha Thompson from Norfolk Senior High School to present how to make effective and lasting change in the language classroom. That's exactly a lot of teachers are thinking about. Sometimes we try different things, but it's hard to follow through, and it's hard for students to keep them engaged. It's hard to keep students engaged and motivated. Here we have Martha to talk about it. Also, I would like to talk a little bit about our guest speakers for next semester. We are recruiting speakers for next semester. So if you are interested, please contact me. And we also already have 4 speakers for next semester. Dr. Ali Moeller and Dr. Tabitha Catalano and Karen Heminger and Sarah Hopper. These are great. Some of you might know them. They are really good speakers and presenters. They have presented in different places. I mean, locally, regionally, and nationally, and internationally as well. So if you want to be one of our speakers, please do contact me. Thank you. And now, Martha, it's yours. Take it away, please.
Let me share my screen here. All right. Oh, there it is. All right. I'm going to talk about change and really how I got to where I am right now in my first, a little bit about myself. My name is Martha Thompson, and I've been teaching. This is my 38th year of teaching French. Wow. I graduated from UNL and with a degree. I have a bachelor's in French and English, actually. And when I started out, I was going to be an English teacher. That was my heart's desire. Unlike today, almost 40 years ago, there were more teachers than jobs. And so I actually kind of fell into this job when they had a late resignation for a French teacher. So I've been at Norfolk High the whole time. And it didn't happen right away, but pretty much right away, within the first couple of years, I kind of fell in love with the idea of teaching language and the way that the brain works when you're teaching language. So this is sort of my story as how I came to make change. What was happening is, and I was just not happy. It's probably been about 10 years ago. I was just not happy with how things were going in my classroom. So I do the same thing, and I would switch it up just a little bit, and I would do new activities, but I had students who could conjugate verbs but not write a sentence, right? They knew all the endings, but if you wrote a sentence, they didn't use them. And only the very best students ever did that. They could identify vocab words, but they couldn't read. They could pass a vocab quiz, but they couldn't read a paragraph. And again, we're talking not about all students, but the very best students could, but I was losing so many students. I was probably losing, I would say, a good half. By the end of French 2, many of them were done because the language wasn't making sense to them. They could do the tasks, but not communicate in the language. Their speaking skills were also not what I would hope. Their listening skills were weak. And again, I'm not talking about like all of my students, but enough of them that it was troublesome for me. Does that make sense? I hope. So it was just a struggle. What? It was just a struggle for me. I was having I was not very happy with the way things were going in my classroom, let's just to say the least. So I thought I need to change and I need to do more than try a new activity. You know, so here we go. Was there another one here? Oh, that was the bottom line. They could do French, but but only a few could truly communicate. Okay, they were learning about French, but they weren't speaking, reading, writing, communicating. It was a struggle. Okay, so I stopped and I thought, if I want my students to read, write, speak, and listen, if I want them to develop those communication skills, I need to do something different. It came to that point where I just thought, I cannot continue doing the same thing over and over, because again, as the first slide said, if I just keep doing the same thing in a new form, I'm not going to make progress. So there's some things that I started to do. I went to a comprehensible input workshop. I started going to NYLA more. I went to ACTFL one time. I started branching out. I did some research on common vocab, like that idea that there is a common set of vocab, that most languages made up of several hundred words, that there is that common core vocab. I read a bunch of ACTFL things. I went to workshops, I networked, and the two books that really hit and that I'm currently working with a lot are the Bryce Hedstrom High Impact Reading Strategies and The Power of Reading. I've done a lot of work with reading and what reading can do for my classroom. So I had a huge paradigm shift into what I wanted to do with my class. I started to think more in terms, rather than following a textbook, that I would start teaching reading, writing, listening, and speaking. And then I would teach the grammar and vocab to support those tasks. And that was my paradigm shift. I didn't throw away my old curriculum. I just made a shift in how I delivered it. I use still some of the same activities, some of the same material, a lot of the same materials, a lot of new ones too. But I had a huge change in how I delivered and what I expected students to be able to do, and what their assessments would be like moving forward. If I wanted them to read, then they had to practice reading. If they were going to speak, we had to speak more. If they were going to listen, then they had to be more listening. It was just a shift in my fundamental ideas of teaching language. When I was going through my undergraduate and when I was in high school a long time ago, it was a very formal way. I learned how to conjugate verbs. I learned how all the vocab. And I was one of the students who loved the language, so I did develop those other skills. But I don't know that in high school that I was ever taught how to read in French. I learned myself. So huge paradigm shift on my end of things. So next thing I did, these are some things that I read and researched that really hit home with me. And I'm going to talk about some things that I did with reading early on, because that's the one that I started with, was reading, because I thought that's the one I can do the most change with. And it's the easiest, not the easiest, but it's the one I wanted to start with when it all came down to it. And a lot of that came from the comprehensible input and the use of novels in the classroom. Now, that's where the idea came from to start using books. But these are a couple of things. The teaching of formal grammar does not help a student's ability to speak, to write, to think, or to learn a foreign language. And again, ability, not that they don't understand the grammar, but because I can understand the grammar doesn't mean I can speak the language, that I can write the language, that I can express my ideas. Okay. The other one is, we may still need to teach some aspects of grammar overtly, but frequently reading the right level will make the aspects of grammar more comprehensible and make it stick with students. And I'm going to come back to this one because this one really hit home with how I currently teach grammar. This one really changed my view of grammar and its role in my classroom. I cannot stress enough that it changed that idea of the role of grammar. When I was teaching, 15 years ago, 20 years ago, teaching, grammar played such a huge part in what I did. And now it's still important because I love grammar. Let's be honest, I love grammar. But the role in the classroom, it became less about the grammar and more about the skills. And I'll talk more about that. Then I started thinking about the vocab list. It's easier to understand a whole sentence, especially one in the context of, just a second, of a story than isolated words or just parts of words. Vocabulary lists are difficult for humans to process, but the subconscious mind vacuums up language at an incredible rate with stories. The idea of stories, using stories in the classroom, became, rather than like in the worksheet, they're isolated sentences that don't tell a story. Have that worksheet tell a story. If I'm going to have them do a grammar point, there's a story to it for them to read the story as they go through. Stories I've found to be hugely important in the grasping of the language. The other thing is shelter vocabulary, not grammar. I read this, and again, this led to a huge paradigm shift in the idea of grammar and vocabulary and its role in the classroom. It has, honestly, we still do the same amount of grammar, or is the same amount of vocab, and probably even more grammar than we used to. It's just done differently. And I think, and the kids grasp and the grammar has stuck with them better. When I'll share a little bit more later about that idea. So here's some other things that I found for the power of reading that led to my sort of paradigm shift. Insights from research. In school, free reading programs are also effective for vocabulary development, grammar test performance, writing, and oral language ability. Free reading programs. The attitude that the acquisition of language must be painful is unfortunately widespread. It doesn't have to be hard. Children were significantly more engaged in actual reading while teachers were reading when the teachers were not reading. Enthusiasm for SSR was not high at the beginning of the year, but increased after 1 or 2 months. Inform the students about the theory and research of free, involuntary reading. So here, I'm going to stop there and talk a little bit about what I did on this. Am I seen here? No? Can you hear me? I hope. Yeah? Okay. So I took all this information and I talked my principal into buying me a set of books that I was going to use with my French 1 class. They were called Brandon Brown veut un chien. Brandon Brown wants a dog. And I developed a unit around this book. And I did this with French 1 students at the end of the first year. I'd done all this research and done all this stuff. And I got to this point and I thought, oh my gosh, I hope they like this book. It's about a little boy who wants a dog. If you're not familiar with the book, it's a comprehensible input book. It's full of common vocabulary. It's full of common structures that you would teach in a French 1 classroom. The end of the year. The first year, the kids liked the book, but they struggled with reading because they had never read before, right? They'd only read the little blurbs in the book. They'd never been given a book to read. I'd always had them do the reading exercises in the textbook. But we worked through it and the kids loved the book. The little boy, he has a dog, he hides a dog in his room. And then his mom thinks it's him that's peeing on the floor and all that. I mean, it's just a silly, silly book. And at the end of the book, he takes the dog back and they find the owner, but at the end of the book, it ends up with he gets a dog for his birthday when he's decided he doesn't want a dog anymore. Anyway, it's a cute little book. The kids loved it. I had bought the material that went with it, the teacher's guide, and I developed a unit from there. But the next year, I started earlier and I got another book. And so we started earlier with one called Eddie the Elephant. And Eddie's an elephant. And we started, honestly, the first week of school reading this book. And every week we would stop and we would read a little chapter about Eddie the elephant. And again, the kids loved it. It empowered a lot of kids and it reinforced the things that we do in class. At the end of Eddie the elephant, I give them several pictures from the book. And I told them, I said, don't worry about grammar or writing. I said, but write in French, the story of Eddie the elephant. And it's been like almost 6-8 weeks in. And I was shocked the first time I had them do this, how well they wrote. Their spelling was terrible, but if you forgave the spelling, they were telling the story. They were adding, and granted, this isn't the only thing we did was reading. We did our regular units. And I had to cut out some very cherished projects that I had loved over the years. But this was more effective. I had to let go of some things to add something that was much, much more effective. And the kids responded. Even today in my French 4, if I say something about Eddie the elephant, they will just go like, oh my God, can you believe I can put that stuff. They could probably write the story today. So the next step I took in this reading is this. I read, and in the Bryce Hedstrom book, and a friend of mine who teaches at Elgin Pope John, she teaches Spanish out there, and she has her students read every day in class. Now, I don't know if it's every day. I'm not quite sure she has, but she got some books and she had them read silent sustained reading. I thought, that's kind of interesting. I wonder how that would work. So I got a hold of, again, I went to my principal, who is very supportive of my efforts. I explained my research. I explained what I wanted to do. And I got a hold of some books. And I started with my French 3 students, because I thought, if I'm going to pilot this, I want to pilot with some kids that tend to like the language, like they have some interest in this. And they'd already read, by that time, I had Eddie the Elephant and Brandon Wants a Dog. And then Brandon, there's like a series of 4 or 5 Brandon books. They had read all the Brandon books through French 2, right? So French 3, we set up some parameters. They could choose a book. They could read 10 minutes 3 times a week. Choose any book they want from my pile back there. There are various books. I probably had, let's see, probably had 20 different titles. And 10 minutes a week. And I picked up a book and I read 2 right along with it, because I thought, well, according to this, it said significant. Whoops, can you see that? I don't know. Where is it?
We don't see your presentation.
You can see the presentation?
Yeah, we can.
Okay, so let me put that.
Share screen.
Share screen. Oh, good heavens. I'm not very good at this. Share screen. There it is. Okay. So this one, it said the most effective while teachers were reading than when teachers were not reading. So I love to read. So I was like, I'm all for that. If I get to read 10 minutes every day, 3 times a week, that's a half hour that they're paying me to read a book. But you know what? The kids got into it. And I know there are some kids that don't read, but if they can't get out of their seat, they can't throw away anything, they can't be on their cell phone, they can't go to the bathroom, they can't switch books. Most kids eventually start to read, and they can pick an easy book or a hard book. I didn't say you had to pick like at your particular level. They could choose from the books. I still do the reading, and it was huge in their comprehension of the language. It was huge. They could read. I could give them a reading test and they could pass. One of the things that I did with the books that we read as a group. Now, they weren't tested. Sometimes I would have them, like, just to keep them a little honest, I would say, okay, write down the book you read today and write down 3 or 4 sentences, like write a little paragraph about what you read today. Most of them would read. Most all of them read it all the time. So it has led to a lot of other changes. Besides the reading, really has led to them being able to write better. Okay. I've expanded that particular program and I've managed to get enough books. I probably have about 60 or 70 titles now of various levels. I took And the kids, they'll tell each other which book is good. Oh, don't read that one, or you need to read this one. And there's some books that are more popular than others, but they read, which has been huge for their retention of vocabulary. Okay. Let's see here. At this point, is there any questions about reading before I move on to something else?
Is it a routine for your students
It's
to
a
read?
routine, Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, 10 minutes. They're trained, like, and I do it now in French 2, 3, and 4. And I started last year, second semester of French 1, they read. They come in the room and they pick up a book. And this year I started having them keep a reading log. They have to write down the title of their book and the pages they read. And I don't, everybody reads at a different pace. So it's not about the number. I'm trying to keep track of, like, I'm collecting some data on how many pages, like an average, that they read. It might take some kids read really fast and they'll read 3 or 4 books in a semester. Some kid or more. Some kids will take, I have one young man who he struggles with reading, but he has almost finished his little novel. And he was pretty dang excited about it. It was some adventure little story, and he could read it. But they're trained. They know exactly what they have to do. They come in, they pick up their book, they pick up their reading log. I start a timer. We all sit down and read. Then everybody puts everything away and we move on. Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. If we don't have school on a Friday, then we don't read. We only read twice that week.
Do you monitor their, do you walk around and provide help when they are reading? Sometimes I'm thinking about maybe there's some words, some, sentence they don't understand.
Yeah,
Do you offer help?
Once in a while the kids will raise their hands, but every book has a little glossary in the back.
Oh, okay.
So they can look up words. And the books, and if they pick up a book that's too hard, then they don't have to pick that book up again. So they kind of find their level of books. And I've got a collection of simple books and like medium books and hard books. And so if they pick up the wrong book, they generally just don't pick it up again.
Okay.
There are some really popular easy books. I got a book this year. I got a set of books like that have little biographies of people around the world or famous people that speak French. And again, there's a glossary, and the kids have gotten really good at using the glossary. And every once in a while at the end of the reading, or they'll raise their hand and I'll go over. But generally I read with them. There's always the kid that's just not going to read. You can't force it, but almost all of them read. And sometimes, like last year, I haven't done it yet this year. Last year, I picked a book. I thought, if you've gone through here, you should be able to read this book. And I picked a paragraph and I typed it out, and I told them their assignment that was their reading test, is write down in English what you understand from this reading. And
thank you.
Yeah, and most kids could do it. The whole idea is not to make it a chore, that they should enjoy the reading. The other books that we do, because then I have the other books that we do as a class. Like right now in French 2, we're about to start a book. One of the Brandon Brown. I have the whole series of Brandon Brown. And through that book, then there are assignments that go with it. And some of the kids, you can tell who's read and who hasn't really read, because if they've been reading, then the book we do in class is quite easy.
We do have a question in the chat.
Yes.
罗老师 asked, is this for high school students?
Yes, this is my high school students, 9, 10, 11, and 12th graders. Yeah.
I'm assuming we can do with secondary,
Yeah.
middle school and elementary as well. If we
Mhm.
have the books for the right level.
Yes, they do have to be the right level. And like I said, I got a wide variety. Some of the books are very simple in French. They're almost to the point of, I don't know, like there is a dog, the dog is big, those kinds of, the dog is, some of them are very simple and some of them are not so simple. But yes, I use this with my high school students. I've seen a huge increase in their ability to read. Huge. It has been amazing. In my French 3 and in French 4, we only read, well, they do their reading of the little readers Monday, Wednesday, Friday. But for the literature in my French 4, we read only authentic, like French literature. It's difficult for them, but they can do it with some support. We read poetry, we read a couple of short novels and things that I've developed. But they read authentic French. I regularly get things for like a news article from a news site, a French news site, and they can read it. They don't know every word, but they know what it does that make sense? They know what it says. They can tell me, they can answer questions about it.
Hi, can I ask more questions?
What? Yes, do you have more questions? Yes, sure.
Yes. So first, you mentioned the book. Is that a book with pictures or just a pure
No, there's
language?
pictures. There's pictures. All the books have pictures in them. Most of them anyway. Especially the low-level books have pictures to aid them, to help them comprehend.
Yeah. Okay, so the book is a physical book or just an e-book?
Well, my books are physical books. Where I bought them, I guess you could get ebooks, but mine are physical books. I guess I prefer the physical books because I like to read with a physical book, but there are ebooks out there, like different companies have ebooks that they have. These are books from, some of the places I bought the books are, they're TPRS books or comprehensible input books. There's tons of them out there.
What type of topic you have, like the book are related?
The topics in the books?
Yes. What kind of a book do you have? Like for
Okay.
each different topics, maybe.
Okay, let's see here. I've got, well, there's one that talks there's some that are about animals. There's a series that I got that has biographies, talks about people. Some of them are about like friendship. There's a couple of them that are kind of spooky in a, high school appropriate way. Some of them are supposed to be sort of adventuresome. I try to vary, like there's all different kinds of things. Some of them talk about, like one of them is about chocolate.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, so there's all kinds of different topics I try to find so that they can find something that interests them. A lot of them are just little stories, like, oh, and some of them have like, oh, he goes on vacation and all these funny things happen to them. One is about the Tour de France. So just a whole wide variety that I've collected.
For the questions, you said after they read the book, you have questions for them. So the question is for the chapter?
Okay.
Is by the chapters or is just by
Yeah,
each book?
okay. I have two things I do. When they read independently and they get to choose their book, I don't question them over that. Like once a semester, they have to do a report about a book that they read that semester. Okay, that is really for them to enjoy reading. And then as a class, we read. So there's the independent reading that I don't test so much. And then there's the reading we do as a class that I do test. And then that is after every chapter, there'll be questions they have to do. There'll be a test over, oh, I wouldn't say over the book, but a lot of times I'll say like the last chapter of the book, they have to read for a test and answer questions. And that's like their test. So when we're the class reading book, the one that we all read together has questions and assignments and vocabulary. And I even bring grammar into it. Like in this next unit, we're studying the past tense in French. So in this book that we read, we study the past tense through this book as well. We tie the grammar that we're currently the topic and our class into the questions and the work in the book. So there's two sides to the reading. There's the independent and then the stuff we do as a group. Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
And I don't test over the independent because what I found is if they don't do the independent reading, it starts to show in their ability to do the reading we do as a class. It starts to show in their ability to comprehend what's going on generally in class because they haven't used that time to read. All the reading research that I've read is that reading reinforces grammar structures, vocabulary. So when they do their independent reading, for that for me is more that they are reinforcing vocabulary and they're more exposed to different sentence patterns and structures. And they're practicing their comprehension skills. So they can bring that comprehension to the book we're reading as a group that they'll be tested on. Are there any more questions? All right, let me move that. So that's what I've done with reading. The other thing that reading has done is it empowers those students who struggle. We've all had those students that language, it just doesn't come to them. They don't get the grammar. Grammar is abstract. They don't get it. They don't understand it. They struggle with it. But when they read, it empowers them. They get this sense like, whoa, I can understand this. I can actually read this. And it keeps them interested in the class, that ability to comprehend what's going on. It's very empowering for those students. I cannot stress that enough. On that, in that sense. Okay. Some other things that I found, and now I'm moving on more to speaking. Speaking has always been, for me, the speaking is a struggle. I think that's probably pretty universal. And there's a couple of things that I've started to do. And I didn't really make anything with up here so much for it. I know I'm flipping through this. I didn't really put this in here, but with speaking, I think students, they get frustrated because they can't say what they want to say. And so they go to the language, they go back to the language they know they're going to be understood in. And I'm still struggling with that one, to be honest. But one thing that I do is I myself speak more French. I speak French. I'm trying to get up to that 90% of my classroom time. I'm not there yet, but I speak French in my presentations, and I'm very careful to try to use vocabulary that they know, and that storytelling idea and questioning techniques. So we're working on the speaking. I've also been working with listening, and there is something that music and poetry for listening. Listening and pronunciation, music and poetry. I heard about some of this. At a workshop at NYLA one time with the music. And I don't remember who was presenting there, but it instilled in me this idea of using that in the classroom. So some of the things I do for pronunciation is singing and poetry. Because when kids sing, they don't think about how hard the word pronunciation is. They just do it. Right? So we sing the alphabet, we sing the numbers, we sing all kinds of songs, you know, once a month, once every 6 weeks, once a quarter. It just depends on where I can fit that part in. But, and you know, I can get them to sing pretty much. I'm pretty good at that. But even more is the poetry. I have some poems that are quite easy to understand in French, and I have them do their short little poems, and we'll do like a choral reading, like where different groups in the room have to say, like, this is your line, so here's how you say it, and you're going to practice it, and then we'll do the whole. It's I wish I had a video of what it was, but I don't. I've never videoed them saying it, but it works out very well. But even more so than those two things is the use of popular music for listening skills. I found some singers and some songs that have school appropriate lyrics. And I've developed some, and mostly they're popular songs or with not traditional. Some of them aren't like currently popular, but we do different activities with them, with the lower levels for listening. And it teaches the kids to put together what they hear with what they see and to distinguish different words. There's one song that I have, that has the word dance, in it. It's called Dernière Danse, Last Dance. And the kids listen to it. And the first time through, I have them listen, just watch the video and listen, and I have them mark in. I'll say, okay, guys, count how many times do you hear the word danse? Now, the trick is in there, there's the word don and the word danse. So there's two words in that song that sound very similar. And so they listen, and not all of them get it right. But another thing that I've come to try to drill into my kids when we're doing these exercises, it's to develop the skill. It's not always about getting it perfect. It's about the effort you put into the skill. So if you struggle and you can't distinguish the words the first time through the song, and then I tell you, they say this word 25 times in this song, when we play the song again, see if you can, how many of those times you can actually hear it. Another thing I do is I'll print out the lyrics and I'll scramble them in chunks though. For lower levels, it has to be in chunks because if the task is too difficult, they'll give up. So, and then they read like which verse. I'll have like the 3 verses of the song. Which verse are they singing? Put a number by which verse they're singing. Underline the cognates in the song. Which words in this song can you figure out? Which words do you think you could figure out what they mean? French has a lot of cognates with English. In the upper levels, we'll do a cloze activity where write down the like what words go in the blank. I'll give them a word bank. What words go in the blank? You know, I like to try to put in words that they pick out the words I think that they would know. I also try to pick out words that sometimes sound similar, but not exactly the same, so that they have to distinguish between particular sounds. For example, is it parler or parle? Which is it? Which do they hear if that were in a song? And again, I always stress to the kids, it's not about getting it wrong or right all the time. It's about doing the best you can and celebrating what you do get right. And we usually listen to the song 2 or 3 times, or the section. Sometimes we just do a section of the song with this. We listen to the whole song and then do the listening part with just a section of the song, like a minute of the song or something. They fill in. And I always tell them, if you listen to it and you only got one word, there's 10 blanks and you got one, well, then the next time you listen, you try to get a second word. And if you got 5 words, then try to get 6. Because it's a skill building activity. I would never test over something like this. It is not meant to be tested. It's meant to build those skills of listening and distinguishing sounds. Plus, it exposes them to popular music that's current. It draws them in. I've had students look up this music and they'll find another song and they'll say, can't we listen to this one? And I'm always like, well, I better listen to it first. I can't just play anything. It involves them into some of the more current, like the pop culture of the target language. One thing I do with another song that is full of cognates. I scaffold it so that I give them the words that I know that they just don't know. And see if they can read the lyrics of the song so they know what it's saying. It's a song that's just absolutely full of cognates. At least two of the verses are. So those are some things I do with music that ties in with reading. But I do believe that music helps that listening comprehension. And it's a different kind of activity. It's a different kind of building skills. I love to have, and when we do these things, I tell the students, we're doing this to build your strength, build your listening skills, build up so that when it does come to a test and you have to listen to this tape, that you've got some skills that you can fall back on. So that's some of the things that I do with that, with the popular music. There are some favorite artists I have in French. If anybody, a French teacher out there, I could certainly share some of those with you, that are really good. There's some Stromae. He's a Belgian singer. Soprano is one of my favorites. Zaz is another French singer. There's a few Celine Dion songs that I like to use. I also like to use music sometimes in my upper levels because I try to find a song that uses that grammatical structure. If we're studying the subjunctive, I try to find a song that has some subjunctive sentences or phrases in it. If we're studying the future tense, is there a song that has some future tense in it? So they can kind of tie those concepts together. So there we go. Now, my last thing, here's a lot, I'm going to kind of move to this one now, is that using data, and again, I'm currently working on speaking, kind of got listening and reading. They're doing much better. And my speaking in class has gotten better. I just need to get them past you just have to speak and not worry always about perfection. So anyway, using data to get resources. Our school, as in any school, the use of data has really become huge. And I don't, when I first started teaching years ago, nobody ever talked about data. They did, but it was like the ACT data, but it wasn't like using data to inform your teaching. I think it's something that a good teacher does but not purposefully. So I decided I'm going to keep some data. So here are some data things that I do. And what I did is I used it to convince my central office to get me some resources. So, but it really has, the other thing about the data is it has shown me what's worked and what's not worked and what needs to be tweaked. So I developed 100 common words. I wanted to know if reading worked. Is this reading worked? So I developed, and I went on and I found these lists of common French words, and I picked 100 of them and I wrote them on a paper. And before we started reading, I gave it to the kids and I said, write down the meanings in English of as many words as you know. Okay, just write them down, as many as you know. If you don't know it, then leave it blank. And then I gave that same test. I gave them a new paper at semester, and then I gave one at the end of the year. And I compiled this data. And my goal was that they would increase by 10%, but they actually increased their, and some of these words were on vocab lists and some of them were not. And they were out of context. they increased some of those kids by, if they knew 15, some of them at the end knew 30. And at the end, the highest that I had ever was a French 3 student knew 90 of them out of context. And out of context is pretty huge. And that's not without any preparation. The reading assessments, I kept track of reading assessments. I kept track in classroom of how much time that the class was only in French. I haven't done that this year, but I did last year for most of the year to monitor, to see if that had an effect. How many minutes we read in class. It came out to be, oh, I don't remember now. I'd have to look at my data. Periodic timed writings. I give them a topic, or I give them like I did with Eddie the elephant, like 10 minutes, write what you can write, but they have to be given a topic for that one. They very rarely can just write. And a lot of these ideas I picked up at workshops along the way, and I wish I could tell you which presenter gave them to me, but and the last is I did proficiency tests. I wrote a grant to our school foundation, and I got money for some proficiency exams. A test that I did not develop, a test that didn't come with the book, that I could only prepare that, and to see how they did, to see if it works, and to test. And this is where I get the idea that their reading is good. What I'm doing with reading works. What I'm doing with writing is starting to work, but it needs some help. Listening, we're working on, because that was low, but it's getting better. And what I'm seeing is that speaking is sort of plateaued, and they're, as a group in testing, speaking is not improving across the data in the proficiency test. I use the Apple proficiency test. Their speaking is still not at the level of their reading or writing. So that's one thing I do to test the efficacy of what I'm doing, and how is this a change worth keeping and continuing to develop. So before we go to questions, just a second here. We have, so here's some things that I kind of thought, well, professional, that impacted how I went about making my change. When I started thinking about this presentation, I thought, how am I going to talk about this? Well, I thought professional development it's in capital, it's in bold type, because that was huge. Okay, that was huge in my being able to do what I'm doing and to make the changes and to step out of my comfort zone and trying new things. I still love a new activity. I still try to do different things, but the paradigm shift came from professional development. When I saw what I needed to do, that came through professional development and research, and then deciding, making a baby step. I started with one thing. This is like 10 years in the development, and it's still going. I didn't overnight just throw everything out and start over. That's not reasonable. That's not even doable. I just started with one thing. I made a decision. I went to my administration. I said, here's what I want to do. Here's why I want to do it. Can I get these materials? They don't cost very much. And thank God I have good they were on board. Then I planned how I'm going to do it. I pilot it. I gather the data. I analyze my data to see if it's working, what's not working. What should I enforce? What shouldn't I enforce? And one thing that my gathering data revolved around, again, back to my reading, because that's the most developed program that I have, is the reading log, making them write down which book they read and what pages they read. I know they could cheat on that and they could write down whatever, but it keeps them a little on the honest side. You know, it keeps them a little honest. Again, I think that there are more kids reading this year because they have to write down how much they read. And I do check it every once in a while and I'll say, hey, seems like you're not reading very much. What's up? You know, and they'll be, "Ooh," and I'm like, maybe you need to like focus more on your reading. So that's where analyzing that data, and again, going back to the research, back to what's up, back to the decision making, tweaking what you do. Then the next year, add a new thing, baby steps. You just do one little thing at a time and you get on a roll. And next thing you know, you've changed. All right, I think that's and here is the bibliography. These are the books that I referred to. The High Impact Reading Strategies, Bryce Hedstrom. There's a lot of Spanish resources in that book, a lot of the quotes came from that book that I used in here. He has a lot of research, and there's the bibliography in that book. I haven't had to write a bibliography since I did my master's degree. So then the Stephen Krashen, The Power of Reading. I know it's a 2004 book, but it really got me thinking about reading. Okay, all right. That's my presentation. I am ready for questions.
Hi, Martha, there's a question. One of the teachers is asking about the reading. How can we find level appropriate independent reading? So
okay. There's a couple of companies online that I've used. One of them is TPRS, the Blaine Ray, TPRS. Now, these are, I only look for French, but TPRS books, that's an online, and I don't know what languages they would have, but I know one is, what's the name of that company I got so many books from? Oh, good heavens. Just a sec. I'm going to snoop through my computer real quick here and find that. I've got Red Hat report. It's in a PO. Wait. Request for materials. Just a second. I had to put through Command Performance Books, TPRS books, Wayside Publishing. Those are the ones that I've gotten books from. What's another one? But when I started looking, I just went online and I Googled like comprehensible input books for French, and found like companies and books. I just did, but TPRS books have some. Yeah, I do use, and then I see the question about authentic material. I do use some authentic materials. when we, like in French 1, when we do the food unit, I've gone online and I've found like menus for French restaurants. And use those. It takes a while to find them. In French 1, we also will use like a weather report from the French weather channel, so to speak. What's another one that I use? There is in my upper levels in next semester and in French 3 and 4, there's a website in French that it's really a news site. It's a French news site for kids. And that one is Un Jour en Actu. It's one, and I'll use stuff from that website quite often, and they have download things. There's a couple of other places I'll go on, get an article in French newspaper and for the upper levels. It's actually harder to find authentic materials for French 1 and 2. So that takes a lot of searching to find those things. I just we did a unit in French 3 about like health, like how to say, you know, I have a cough, I don't feel good. Just common kinds of things. And I found a little poster from the Canadian Department of Health that talked about washing your hands, and it was a COVID poster, and it was just had tons of my vocab words on it. So I scour the internet for authentic materials that will work with what we're doing. Yeah. I've just mined the internet for those things. But yes, I use, we just did a unit in French 2 that had soccer. The vocab had to do with soccer, but again, the vocab run, play, throw, kick, those are useful words. Well, maybe not kick, but I went, you know, I found a little article about soccer, or we read a web page. I use a French supermarket when we do the food unit. That's another one. I have a web quest where they have to look through a French supermarket. And part of it is to use their vocab to maneuver through the website. The other part is it's cultural, because I tell that one of their tasks is see if you can find your favorite junk food in France. I tell them they can't look for fruits and vegetables because those will you'll find that. But do they have Oreos? Do they have Mountain Dew? Do they have Dr. Pepper at this? So that's something. I do use various kinds of authentic readings. But it takes a while to find those and then develop the activity to go with it. So yes. Any other questions? Hello?
Any other questions? I think we are good.
Okay. So is that, I know it's a little early, but I guess I don't have a lot else.
I really appreciate what you presented, and it makes a lot of sense. All of it just really makes a lot of sense.
Thank you.
The reading and the fact that, I think it's wonderful for kids to read, but so many of them don't read anymore the way
No.
we used to read. And I enjoy having a book in my hand, but I don't mind reading ebooks too, you know.
Yeah.
And, but I think that that the children probably get a better sense of okay, I'm reading this language. I think they can get closer to it. I don't know if you understand what I'm trying to say, but
Yeah.
I think it would stick to them better in their hand rather than on an
Yeah.
ebook.
Well,
Yeah.
if one reason I didn't do the ebook is I would have to monitor that because I would either have to use our program to control their computers so they couldn't get out of the ebook, or and it just would be too big of a chore. So
Right.
I didn't do the ebooks. There are ebooks out there though.
Oh,
It's
I'm
hard to
sure.
monitor.
Yes, it's
You
so
don't
much
know.
harder to monitor.
You never know whether you're reading the book or doing something else.
Yeah. And yeah. So I just think there's something, honestly, I think there's something about paper that that helps kids learn. I do online activities. I do. And I use the internet. Like I said, I have activities where we visit the grocery store, or there's online practice activities. There's things I do online, but man, there's just something about paper and pencil and processing that just can't be replicated on a computer.
Absolutely. I have one question that kept going through my mind while you were talking. You know, here in the U.S. we have lots of dialects and accents and whatnot.
Mhm.
New York, California,
Yeah.
Alabama, you know, all
Yeah.
that. And so this is the U.S. English, but when we were talking about the French, we have Canadian and
Yeah.
African and French and Belgian, and I'm sure
Mhm.
that there's differences. Do you touch on any of?
I do. Not so much in the lower levels. We talk about different places around the world, and but in the upper levels, we'll talk about, or we'll listen to the internet, and YouTube is wonderful. Like here is African French, you know, and there's so many, or not just African French, but there's so many places in Africa. They can't just really narrow it down
Right.
to one place, but we'll listen to different accents. Even in France, there's different accents from north to the south, or you get over, you know, so we do listen to those things when we talk about accents and vocabulary, and try to expose as much as I can the students to that more global look at the French.
That's awesome.
I even talk about the Cajun French, which is very different. So that there is a difference. So we do some of that, and I try to work some of that in.
Yeah. Martha, I do have a question. How you talked about you have a reading log for students to keep track
Yes.
so that you can keep track as well. Can you share how it looks like?
Yeah, I've got it right here on my computer here somewhere. Let me look here. I've got all my, where is it here? Should be under reading. My reading. I just made, where is it? It's reading log. Let me search this. Reading log. There it is. Whoops. Here, I can upload it, but I just have them put their name, and I went through and put in the dates. And then what pages, what book, what pages. That's all it was. They didn't have to write anything else.
Yeah, can you share screen? We still,
Oh, yeah, let me share the screen. I'm
yeah,
sorry.
thank you.
I'm not very good at this, but this is what it looks like. Let me close that. I just haven't put on their name. And then I went through and figured out all of the first semester dates. And that we would have school on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. They write the book, they write the pages. If they're gone, they don't have to make it up.
Okay. Oh, so you make it actually in French.
Yes, so
Okay.
the date, date, livre, page. See, they're cognates pretty much.
Okay. So, what does Liva mean?
Book.
Sorry.
The
Oh,
book,
book.
so
Okay.
that's the title,
Okay.
the title.
Yeah. Thank you for showing that. So
Yeah.
students just need to do like a very simple
Yeah,
log.
they just write the name and like if they read page. I wasn't very clear at the beginning. I was thinking they would write, I read page 1 through 5. No, some of them, I've got to be more clear next time. Some of them wrote like 3 pages, 5 pages. They wrote the
Oh,
how many pages they read instead of the pages they read. I wasn't very clear. See, I
Oh.
learned something. You always
Yeah.
have to
maybe
look like it's
maybe
not
put an
big-
example in the
Yeah.
first line, maybe put an example before the
Yeah.
date.
And yeah, that's a good idea. See, that's where you always learn. I always have to learn from what I've done, you know? Always
Yeah,
have to
we
learn
all
from what I
do.
do.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's life. Yeah, that's us.
Yeah.
But I really
So-
think it's kept them a little more honest,
Yeah.
you know?
Oh, we do have a question in the chat.
Okay.
Do you do something to help students to communicate in French speaking?
Speaking. That is the one I'm working on right now. Honestly, the speaking. I've gotten better. Okay. I think I struggle with that one, to be honest. I struggle with getting them to speak.
Mm,
And I'm gonna try some stuff next semester with my French 4. But I haven't quite narrowed that down yet. I do different activities, like with speaking. There are some activities that I do with speaking.
yeah.
That
Um,
practices vocab and the concepts we're currently working on. Like one that I do is, there's just different things that I do that try to encourage the speaking in class. I think
Yeah.
what it's going to come down to is me just requiring, making like, you have to ask that question in French. And I don't care if it's correct or not, but you have to start.
Hmm.
And I
Yeah.
think that's the thing that I'm struggling with right now is how do I require that and get them to do it without just shutting completely down?
Yeah.
I'm sure it has to do with they don't want to be embarrassed by, you know, the mouth moves different, your tongue moves different.
Yeah, it is, and you sound
from
different.
English
I
or
tell you,
other languages.
I wish I could. I have one young man, and again, he's the same young man that struggles with reading, but that boy will try to say anything in French. And
That's good. Yeah.
and you know what? It's not always right. And as a matter of fact, most of the time there's full of errors, but he's making progress over time.
Yeah. Yeah. That's true.
His pronunciation's getting better. His use of vocab is getting better. And a student the other day was talking to me. She came in with her mother for conferences and she said, this boy's name, she goes, I don't know how he speaks so well. And in my head, I'm thinking, he doesn't really speak that well, but he's speaking. And that's the key, is he just dives in and just does it. And I wish I could get the rest of them to get past that. Okay, I've got to learn this and be perfect before I venture out into
Yeah.
the speaking world. And you're right with that sound, like, I don't want to make a mistake. I don't want to sound stupid.
When
I'm
they
still working
wouldn't,
on that
you
one.
know, it's just the try, they need to try. And
Yeah,
And I think that's across the board in all languages, or people, whether they're learning English or French or any other language.
yeah. And it's so direct. Because there's no, like, I can write this and then I can look at it, maybe amend it or edit it. With reading, with speaking, there's really not much editing to do. Like, it's just there.
Yeah.
So,
I think sometimes we need to help students, create a safe environment so students can
yes.
try, lower the affective filter. And I actually have something to share. And
Oh.
that's something I tried in my classroom. I mean, a lot of
Let's see. I would love it.
yeah.
Just like you
So students can be, they're safe. They feel safe to talk when they are not, required to talk by themselves. I mean, alone. So everybody's talking. So that's something I tried. Can you see my screen, right?
Yeah, I do.
So it's a weird names. This is a random name picker, but I did not do the random name. I do the question. You can see it's really easy to
Oh.
create. Then I ask the students, I ask them to, okay, stand up and move around. I have a timer or something like, I said like 10 seconds or 20 seconds, they move around. And when the time goes off, they have to stop and find who is closest to them to pair up.
Oh, that's cool. And
And
then
so
they just
they
have
have-
to say whether
Yeah.
they like I like sushi. I don't like ramen. I don't like
sushi
sushi
or-
or ramen.
Yeah. Yeah, so they need to talk about it, make a choice. I like sushi, and they explain why. And then their partner answer the question as well. So once they finish it, I remove it. So they have more questions to go through. It's like a routine activity in the classroom to
And it
keep
gets-
them talking and also move around a little bit. Next round, maybe not a timer.
Wheel of
I just,
names.
count to 20. I count to 20 or count down from 10 or whatever. You can do it. And then pair up with somebody who is closer to you. Whoever has longer hair start,
Yeah.
kind of thing. Or a bigger shoe size start, kind of thing.
Well,
That
and I
was
like that.
brilliant.
See,
Brilliant.
that's what those are, there, I have some speaking activities that I do similar to that. And really, I need to do more speaking.
Yeah.
Just more.
Yeah,
Balance
sometimes they
more.
just need to, we have to help them to get more comfortable talking. They are not comfortable talking when they are asked to speak by themselves. But
No.
if everybody's talking, it's more like, okay, we
Yes.
can just step in.
Yes.
Kind of
Liu
thing.
老师, may I know your class, which level is middle school students or high school students?
High
Who?
school.
Your students.
Martha's, right?
My students, I teach
no,
high
I'm-
school. They're 9, 10, 11, and 12th graders.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, they're
mean,
all
Liu
high
老师-
school.
Thank you. How about you, Liu 老师?
Now I
You
no longer
mentioned
teach.
about the
The random name picker, right? This
Yes.
one. It works at different levels as well. I used to teach in high school, but I also sometimes taught in Chinese. I did teach in community language class as well. I mean, Chinese schools.
I mean,
So-
for the high school level students, they also enjoying the game, the one. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, you
Good
can
to know.
have different, you can have different questions.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, you can
Good
have
to know.
different
Thank
questions.
you, thank you.
Yeah, and another one I would like to share is quiz trade. I think you're familiar with that, right? Quiz trade.
Yeah,
Yeah. So it works as well.
Yeah, that's brilliant. Thank you for sharing.
yeah, I'm gonna use that one. I think even this week. I'm trying to think about how I can tie it into some stuff. I like that idea. And it wouldn't take very long to set up either. I've done some things with pictures and things but this would be something that you could do quickly and often without a huge amount of setup for speaking. Because sometimes speaking activities take a lot of setup.
Yeah, this, I put the link in the chat. It's really easy. You just
Mhm.
click it and then put your questions in there. I can share it
Yeah.
again okay. Where is
Yeah.
it?
No,
It would match up with a lot of what you were explaining that you were doing, like the weather,
Yeah.
or
Yeah,
you
you
could
could do
tie
so
that in
much
with
with it.
sports, or you
Yeah.
like
I-
Yeah.
water skiing or snow skiing. Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah,
yeah.
just
Yeah.
put your questions in this box and then
Mhm.
it can generate for you.
Oh, see, and then, well, that would be easy. You could even put them in a document and just copy and paste it. You could make
Yeah.
a whole bunch of them and copy and paste. And then you wouldn't have to retype them every time.
Yes, that's the cool part. That's technology where technology really helps.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, that would be awesome. I
And
like that.
another thing I would like to share is, I don't know, I think a lot of teachers actually are familiar with Jamboard. So information gap activities. This is not only about information gap definition facts. Sorry, I should make it smaller. Okay, and let's move it somewhere else. Example and non-example, then actually they can work together when they are learning vocabulary. They can talk a little bit, help out a little bit.
Awesome.
And this one is like I created for different seasons, like 4 corners. So students can pick their favorite season and they have to explain.
I like all that. That's awesome.
Yeah, it's also, there's a empty one that everybody can use, and Venn diagram, and
Yeah.
many things. Living sentences, they can help each other out and characterize. I use Jamboard, so or we can. I don't know whether, okay, I didn't put it here. So we can also put like information gap. So on the student, they have different pictures. So I mean, similar, but different pictures, like 5 differences. You have to figure out 5 differences. You have to figure out like 3 differences. And, student A has a picture, student B has another picture, and they have to talk to figure out.
Yeah. Those are all awesome ideas. Like I said, I'm still doing a lot of the same old activities, and I think I just need to be more.
Yeah.
Again, I need to be more systematic and consistent. Just like I did with the reading, I need to be purposeful in using them much more. You know what I mean? Incorporating them.
Mhm.
There's a balance to everything, isn't there?
Right. Well, you're doing a wonderful work. I mean, I would love to sit in and watch your students one day. I think you're doing wonderful things.
They really have. And the one thing I've seen is I have my French 3 right now has 18 students. And they're started out, in order to take French 3, they had to start as a freshman or sophomore. So if they were a junior or senior, they couldn't. But out of those 60 students, and I don't know how many were eligible, but there were 60 to start with, and 18 of them are still in French.
Yeah,
That's pretty good retention rate.
Yes, it is.
That's pretty good because there's usually a huge drop off after 2.
yes, that's true. Yeah.
Because for some reason, people think that 2 years of a language is enough. I'm sorry.
They don't want to continue and we need to, you know.
Yeah, we take a lot of English. Yeah. So it
Right.
makes sense that we would take a lot of the other language we're studying.
All
Yeah.
right. Okay, well,
Yeah,
And here I'm
No.
talking about here in the US, you know.
yes.
We have to have a lot of English credits and still I hope more teachers are willing to prioritize reading
yeah,
for the
that's true.
students, you know, to read to learn.
Yeah.
You know, if they know how to read and they are willing to read, they can learn so much more.
Yes, that's true. Okay. No more questions? Okay, it's time.
Okay.
Thank you so much for
Yeah,
your
thank
great
Thank you, Crystal,
presentation.
for
Thank
putting
you.
this
Thank
on.
you
It's
for
wonderful.
listening.
Thank you.
Thank you. And next week, we're going to have Dr. Barbara Butz to present on indigenous languages. Thank
Oh,
you.
okay.
Thank
Yeah.
you so much.
Awesome.
Yeah. And we're going to talk about why it's important
Yeah.
to teach tribal languages. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so
Thank
much.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. And
Thank
thank you,
you.
Martha.
Thank you.
Appreciate your message. It's awesome.
All
Yeah.
right. I hope it was good. I don't know.
Yeah, it's good.
All right. We'll talk to you. Oh, probably the 7th. Are you going to be there the 7th of November?
Yes. Are you
Okay.
coming to Nyla or no?
I'll be at Nyla. I'm headed
Okay.
down there for the Friday and Saturday.
Okay,
I
that's
took
awesome.
that's just in a week. I took that Friday off of professional days.